In my case, a serious commitment to Veritas requires resignation with precious memories, but absolutely no regret. I was just about to brag about how I got through such an incredible letter, and all of my pronunciations were on point. On point, I tell you. There were so many good big words, so many huge words in there, but I was perfect. I was flawless, I tell you. Oh my God, it was the last word. It was literally the last word. Holy, oh, Cornell. Hey, by the way, we haven't done the new Rising very much, mostly because it's an abomination. But hey, let's take a quick trip and see how it's doing. We got Ryan Grimm. I'm a massive fan of Ryan Grimm, so that's cool. Okay, Ryan Grimm is king shit.
Cornell West announced his resignation in a letter to the Harvard dean that he actually tweeted out. He said, "This is my candid letter of resignation to my Harvard dean. I try to tell the unvarnished truth about the decadence in our..."
Yeah, I didn't think they were going to have Ryan back on after his complete destruction of his co-host when she was basically trying to defend Russians, what is it? Their participation in World War II. And tried to say, well, at the end of the day, I mean, we had to defeat communism after defeating the Nazis. I mean, it was just part and parcel. And he's like, you know that it was the commies that defeated the Nazis. I mean, I'm not trying to be a Stalinist here or anything. I'm just trying to talk about the facts of what happened.
Our market-driven universities, let us bear witness against the spiritual rot. Ryan, what did you think about this announcement?
Well, I think that an academia that can not find a place for one of the great intellectual heavyweights of the last half century
absolutely
is utterly broken and should be ashamed of itself. So this is Harvard Divinity School. This is after his time both at Harvard and at Princeton. And I think that it's also tinged with racism. And I want to read one line from his resignation speech where he says, "All my courses were subsumed under Afro-American religious studies, including those on existentialism, American democracy, and the conduct of life." And then he goes on with another litany of complaints about the way that he was treated, both personally and spiritually and professionally. And the idea that you would look at Cornell West and say that the only place his classes belong is the Afro-American Religious Studies Department is not a knock on the Afro-American Religious Studies Department, but it misunderstands the profound and transcendental nature of his life's work. Mm-hmm. Like he is somebody who has done more to try to bridge the racial divide and to try to connect poor whites, poor blacks, poor brown people. In a common cause against those who are oppressing them. And to see him treated this way is just an incredible indictment of not just this school, but I think of all of academia.
Yes, a lot of his letter is actually about, interestingly enough, about some sort of the nitty-gritty of his negotiations with the school over pay. And it seems, to your earlier point, outrageous that at Harvard, which is supposedly the glistening example of America's academic system, they could not work this out with Dr. Cornell West. Of any person that they should be bending over backwards to accommodate at that institution, it is Cornell West, because he is somebody who is doing the necessary and difficult scholarship right now. And I mean, the fact that they couldn't find a place for him, to your point, I think that's a great way to put it, that they couldn't find a place for him, that they weren't, instead of, balking at his request, that they wouldn't even be bending over backwards to accommate him. That's a statement in and of itself.
Right. If they couldn't make it work, it means they didn't want to.
Oh, thanks, Ashley.
And he's also known not just as a scholar who shaped his field, but as an incredible mentor and teacher. So you have a lot of scholars in academia who do great scholarship, they do great work, but they're useless when it comes to actually teaching, which is allegedly one of the functions of a university. That was not the case with Dr. West. He's also, extremely selfless. I moderated a panel last week or the week before that he was on with Julian Assange's brother and Julian Assange's father. He drove down from New York to Washington, D.C., to the National Press Club to do this panel. And then when it was over, got back in his car and drove back to New York. Not for any money, and not because it's a flashy kind of event that's gonna get him a lot of notoriety. He just felt like it was his obligation. It was his moral responsibility to do this.
Oh,
He
Ashley's
came down
on
and
it.
did it. Turn back around.
Ashley's
and you can see
my
the same
clipper extraordinaire.
Principle in his letter of resignation, that he's somebody who is doing this because he says in the letter, he talks about.
Let's quickly read the letter and start by that. June 30th, 2021. I hope and pray you and your family are well. Of course, Cornell would start with that. This summer is a scorcher. Here's my brief and candid letter of resignation. How sad it is to see our beloved Harvard Divinity School in such decline and decay. The disarray of a scattered curriculum, the disenchantment of talented yet differential faculty, the disorientation of precious student loom large. When I arrived 4 years ago with a salary less than what I received 15 years earlier, with no tenure status after being a university professor at Harvard and Princeton, I hoped and prayed that I could still end my career with some semblance of intellectual intensity and personal respect. How wrong I was. With a few glorious and glaring exceptions, the shadow of Jim Crow was cast in its new glittering form, expressed in the language of superficial diversity. All my courses were subsumed under Afro-American religious studies, including those on existentialism, American democracy, and the conduct of life. No possible summer salary alongside the lowest increase possible every year. Yet I delivered 2 convocation addresses, 1 commencement speech in 4 years. I was promised a year sabbatical, but I could only take 1 semester in practice. And to witness a faculty enthusiastically support a candidate for tenure, then timidly defer to rejection based on Harvard administration's hostility to the Palestinian cause was disgusting. We all knew the mendacious reasons given that nothing had to do with academic standards. When my committee recommended a tenure review, also rejected by the Harvard administration, I knew my academic achievements and student teaching meant far less than their political prejudices. Even my good friends in the Afro-American African Studies department were paralyzed, given their close relations to the administration. And after teaching extra courses, including 5 courses in 1 year, this silence continued. When the announcement of the death of my colleague, Dr. Jacqueline Olga Cook-Rivers, who received none when her blessed mother died, any ordinary announcement about a lecture, award, or professional advancement receives about 20 replies. This kind of narcissistic academic professionalism, cowardly deference to anti-Palestinian prejudices of the Harvard administration, and indifference to my mother's death constitute an intellectual and spiritual bankruptcy of deep depths. In my case, a serious commitment to veritas requires resignation with precious memories, but absolutely no regret. I was just about to brag about how I got through such an incredible letter, and all of my pronunciations were on fucking point. On point, I tell you. There were so many good big words, so many huge words in there, but I was perfect. I was flawless. Flawless, I tell you. Oh my God. It was the last word. It was literally the last word. Holy no. Cornell, you powered me. No, I'm not doing a reading. I did so well. I was so proud of myself. I was like, holy shit, Lance, your dictation is on point. You were doing justice to these incredible words, these illuminating sentences. Oh man, the diction. Fucking the last word. Oh, Cornell, I'm sorry. I regret everything. I regret everything. How could I? Oh no. I lost viewers? Probably. I'm sure I shaved off like 100 people who are like, why is Lance reading this in full? No regrets. No regrets, anybody. All right? When are we gonna get communism? Huh? When are we gonna get communism? I want my communism.
Showing the power of government in helping working and poor people.
Do I even get partial credit for how I was so flawless in every single part of that? Like, oh man, I was impressing myself midway through, and I was like, Don't fuck this up, Lance. Concentrate. This is important, all right? His words need to be properly elucidated and spoken, all right? You need to give them the gravitas that they deserve. Holy shit. Holy shit. I regret everything.
The $15 minimum wage, though, we've got to still push through. Brother Bernie is right about that. But generally speaking, it's a positive orientation. We'll see whether it transcends the very narrow neoliberal limits that so many of us have associated Biden with, to see whether he's moving toward this more robust FDR-like legislation. So I am in some ways encouraged. Similarly so with the ending of the attempt to end the support of the Saudis, sending equipment to the Saudis in the Yemen war. I was very encouraged by that. Now, when it comes to a number of other imperial policies in Africa and Latin America, in the Middle East, on West Bank and in Gaza and so forth, I'm not too encouraged at all by the Biden administration, but I want to keep track of the best as well as the worst in the Biden administration.
Well, Professor West, your own employment situation has been much in the news of late. You're leaving Harvard again in a controversy. This time, Harvard was not willing to grant you tenure. One of the most famous academics and philosophers and public intellectuals in the country. Could you talk about what specifically happened this time that has made you decide to leave Harvard and go back to Union Theological Seminary?
My dear brother, I'm one of these free black men that don't put up with any kind of disrespect. And there's too much Harvard dishonesty, too much Harvard hypocrisy in terms of mistreating too many black folk at high levels. And I thought he would be different this second time, but it turned out that I was wrong, and so it's time to go again. Now I do want to acknowledge the best of Harvard, though, brother. We got Du Bois, Paul Sweezy, Helen Keller, Sister Amy Goodman, Rick Wolf. I mean, there's a rich legacy of Harvard, and I associate it with the best. But the worst, of course, is Harvard's commodified state, tied to big money, tied to image, tied to reputation, and in the end, just being of service to the empire and being of service to the ruling classes. So you got the best and the worst of Harvard at work. And it's time for me to go back to the great Union Theological Seminary. That's my institutional home, my brother. I can stretch out and try to be a truth teller and bear witness, still learn and listen, but also be in the middle of the Big Apple. Nothing like it.
You've suggested that.
Man, I don't think a lot of other people have the power to captivate when he speaks. It's something to be taught. I certainly don't have it. I'm nothing but regrets, over here. I hope to have it one day.
Professor West, that you believe some of the reasons that you were denied tenure were your support for Palestinian rights as well as for Senator Bernie Sanders. Can you elaborate on both?
Well, I argued to myself, it could either be age, but when I'm giving the Gifford lectures, it's kind of Nobel Prize version of philosophical lectures. So someone in Scotland feels that I still have something to say. So it couldn't be age. It couldn't be academics because I'd published 20-some books. I was a university professor at Harvard, university professor at Princeton. I got tenure at Yale 37 years ago. So it's a joke. It's just ludicrous and ridiculous that they would be so hesitant to allow for a tenure process to go forth. So I figured it had to be political. And the most taboo issue on U.S. campuses these days in many instances has to do with the vicious Israeli occupation of precious Palestinians. It's very difficult to have a respectful, robust conversation about that. And I am unequivocal in my solidarity with Palestinian brothers and sisters. And as you've heard me say on many times, if there's a Palestinian occupation of Jews, then I'm unequivocally in solidarity with Jews. I hate injustice. I hate occupation. I'm not.
That pretty much encapsulates leftism for me, right? But you're fighting for oppressed peoples, and I know people like Sargon of Akkad try to characterize the whole thing as leftists. They simply they despise power. You know, like all of them, they fear power and they don't like power. And that's really what it is, you know. And for me, I simply prefer lowering the age of consent because that gives me and my penis power. That's truly what I care about.
Not in any way going to stop talking about the Palestinian plight and predicament. There was a brilliant Jewish Israeli scholar who was denied a tenure position at Harvard just 2 years ago, and most believe it was political. Most believe it was political. Sister Laura.
No, I need to make the Cornell emote. So I have so many emotes I need to add because we can get rid of so many now since we have animated versions of them. So I'm going to be getting rid of the AOC dancing one, and I can just actually have her dance as an animated emote. I'm going to get rid of a couple others. So didn't we have one before? I don't think we've ever had a Cornell West one. So we're adding Cornell West, and we're adding Sam Cedar. And his powerful eyes. We're gonna have that one as well. Have I ever done an interview? No, I haven't. It's in my bucket list. The interviews I've been trying to secure for a very long time right now are Cornell West, Chomsky, but I think Chomsky is a lost cause. Like everyone's like, I email Chomsky and I get a reply. I've never had a reply. I don't know if it's just because of how clown shoes my entire stream is, or someone is just like, oh, don't associate with that individual. He's like he talks about fucking watermelons and stuff. Anyways, so I'm trying to do that one, but I'm pretty sure I can secure an interview with Cornell West, and I'm also speaking to someone right now about getting Zizek on the show as well.
Pena Garcia was just denied, and I think that was in part political. So people argue, well, you're just grabbing for straws. No. I detect a pattern at Harvard in terms of not being open to voices that are fundamentally committed to the dealing with the plight and predicament of precious Palestinians. And
speaking of that pattern, you were quoted at Cornell. You were quoted in Truth.
Oh, the Cornell West music video is done. It's up on Patreon right now. So if you want to see it for as little as $1, you can help support the show. But otherwise, I'll play a little bit of it at the end of the segment.
Out of saying if you subtract the number of black people in the Department of African and African American Studies at Harvard, and only include black folks in the other.
I would fully have a conversation with Joe Rogan. No, like any given day, if like it's obviously not going to happen. I'm too much of a baby. He also doesn't platform a lot of leftists, like actual leftists. You know, he platforms people who are going to regurgitate his ideas that he knows are quote unquote on the left, like Tulsi Gabbard.
The departments, Harvard looks like the National Hockey League. Could you explain?
That's true. That's true. Well, a few weak spots against the backdrop of whiteness, just like Silicon Valley and just like Wall Street. All of these professional managerial sites at the highest level of the empire still are.
I would try
DMT
white if it meant I can get on Joe Rogan's podcast to be able to speak
at Harvard,
power.
You have a significant number of black folk at the highest level of administration, of deans, but it hasn't translated into increase of faculty, and it hasn't translated, most importantly, in terms of making sure that the students.
Lionel, I wish we'd have a conversation with someone about platforming. I have had many people critique me over the years about this, and I'm always going to stay on the side of these people who have large platforms like Joe Rogan. You should not fear speaking to them. At the end of the day, they are platforming you, in essence. Joe Rogan has an infinitely larger subscriber base than me, and having someone like I would prefer, like I am fine never being platformed by someone like that in exchange for him platforming one trans person, absolutely one trans person who is going to be able to educate him on trans issues. Okay, I will forgo any platforms ever ever happen, you know. But I would want that. I like that would be so much more benefit, you know.
Seeking truth and concerned about issues of
it's gonna be Blair White or
Caitlyn
Caitlyn Jenner.
To professors who are raising these kinds of issues. This has to do with the ethnic studies program.
That was a joke, lost but broken. I don't think Tulsi Gabbard is on the left. She's a TERF who does support Hindu fascism. So yeah.
to do with courses in history, the great Walter Johnson and the others trying to provide some
Chelsea Manning
frameworks
would be perfect
in order to come to terms with these injustices.
Chelsea Manning would easily be able to get on the Joe Rogan podcast. He would actually love that. He loves the idea of platforming people like her or Julian Assange, stuff like that. You know, he would I consider Rogan transphobic? Yes, exceptionally transphobic. Probably the most prominent like transphobic voice on the large stage.
Be it predatory capitalism, or be it white supremacy or male supremacy or imperialism around the world or whatever. Those issues are very difficult to get at the center of a discourse. And this is true not just at Harvard, but at other places as well.
University of Toronto.
Especially at Harvard. I mean, Harvard now, I think, suffers from a kind of self-idolatry that it needs to be critical of itself in order to grow. And again, if it can be in contact with the best of its past, then it's got a chance. But if it just remains well adjusted to the status quo, generating careers and opportunist students rather than critically oriented students who have a heart and soul concerned about suffering here and around the world, then Harvard has a chance.
Are sports the main issue you think that caused him to view him as such, or just who he has on? It has been a career of platforming some of the largest transphobes in the intellectual dark web. For example, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, who will go on a show and say just untold levels of villainy in terms of the lies they will espouse about trans people and trans issues. And platforming them, and then not pushing back on their bigotry as well, agreeing with their points. Like, that is platforming. He is platforming them, and he's platforming them in order to spread their hatred and their ideology. Anyways, obviously, a great level of respect for Cornell West, for speaking truth to power in this instance, for calling Harvard out in what can only be described as an obscene practice of denying him tenure when in every level I believe he deserved it. It's utterly devastating that someone, again, who has worked so hard with such a prestigious career, who happens to be an open and proud socialist, and probably one of the best voices for socialism on the left, to have gone through this is truly despicable, to say the very least.
Congratulations on your new book, Stay This Way Forever.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Now, you've held tenured positions in the past at Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, and you've been back at Harvard in non-tenured position for the past 5 years, but the university declined your recent request to be considered for tenure again. Were you given reasons for why you were denied this time, and why did you decide to leave rather than pursue your case?
Well, it's a complicated case in the sense that it was a tenure review that they had denied, and I think they've changed their mind now, but it's too late. And I don't really know exactly why. They said maybe age, but no, that couldn't be the case. I'm giving a gift of lectures in Scotland. It couldn't be academics, because I was a university professor at Harvard and Princeton. I was tenured at Yale 37 years ago, so it doesn't make any sense. And so my hypothesis is it might have something to do with politics, but you know, we'd have to check and see on that. I just want to make sure that each and every one of the universities have a fundamental commitment to intellectual freedom and can hold off market pressures, so that whatever issues we talk about, I mean, I'm deeply concerned about the Israeli occupation and Palestinian plight predicament, and that's not a popular issue. And I think we have to have a serious, robust, uninhibited conversation about that issue that's respectful. It's not anti-Jewish, but it's not anti-Palestinian either. So that I'm concerned about that issue, but I'm concerned about issues across the board. It's got to be intellectual freedom at a Harvard, at a Yale, at a Roxbury Community College, at a University of Chicago, at a Howard or a Spelman, anywhere.
Well, you say you're concerned about that issue. Are you concerned that potentially your support for the Palestinian cause may have cost you tenure?
I wonder about that. I know there's other cases recently at Harvard where there's been very high quality scholars. In fact, there was a Jewish Israeli woman, one of the finest scholars, who was very critical of the Israeli occupation. She also was denied a tenure position. So that I hope that there's not a pattern setting in.
You refuse to move forward until you connect with the best of what came before. It could be grandmama or granddaddy. It could be your father or uncle. It could be your coach. It could be your jazz teacher. Somebody you know who enabled you, so you already shatter all of these American myths about being self-made. No such thing as being self-made, because the condition of truth is always to allow suffering to speak.
Do you like movies? Do you like Serfs? Do you want movies and Serfs watching the movies? So then come over to the new channels. It's the Serfs the cinema. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Can you do the thing, that thumbs up and comment and all those things that help us out in the algorithm that controls every aspect of our lives? Also, if you happen to have a Facebook account, can you delete it? Like, just delete it. You should probably delete your Facebook account because it's not a great company. But hey, if you can't do that for whatever reason, I understand. And could you also go to facebook.com/thesurftimes then and give us a little like and a follow. We're just trying to push back against the fact that people like Ben Shapiro happen to dominate the platform entirely. And when everyone asks why do older generations believe the things they believe, one of the problems is the majority of them on social media use Facebook. So to counter that, we're just going to be on there too now. Also, if you happen to have a union or a worker co-op or even a leftist project, podcast, website, Zoom, MySpace, it doesn't matter. We will advertise it for free on this channel. All you got to do is go to weareserfs.com and use the forms that we got there, weareserfs.com. Thanks, everybody.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and VK Jehannam, we are prepared to commit human sacrifices for your eternal glory. To our monarchs, the Tim Caucus and Tom Spiker, we are humbled to be your oafish jesters, clowning around in your royal court. To our lords, Evan Nudie, Tofox, Ryan Lubin, Trevor R., Jeff Lamb, and Alexander Thaler, we shall proudly carry your standard onto the battlefield and die for your precious land. To our esteemed Knights of the Round Table, Dark Puppy, Jenna Towell, Anna Loves Riley, Quiet 185, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojak, Saren 42, Chronic to Hemphog, The Great Pudini, Bone Genie, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramona Costa, J. Fraser Cartwright, Jimmy Bignuts, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Yopi, Josh Mickelson, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our glass, we raise our swords, and we salute you.